Well, hey, Cement Shoes. Good to see you. I don't know if you're still here, Jody, at school, but if you are, good to see you too. Happy Saturday. Wow, what a week. What a week. Let me just give you guys a little update about the hurricane because you guys were all so sweet to check in on me, and I really, really appreciate that. So, where I am in Florida was considerably far from where the hurricane ended up ultimately making landfall. But it was a big storm, and so my part of Florida got, some of the effects. Not that not nothing, no anywhere near what like Northport got and Fort Myers and stuff like that. We got a lot of wind and a lot of rain and even hey nonstop mom, but not even as much rain as they thought we would get. We lost a couple of trees and honestly we were extremely lucky. Um, Ian was a big storm and he wasn't playing around and he came in a little bit slower than what they thought initially, and then, he played in the Gulf and ended up getting stronger because initially they had him coming, making landfall at a 3, which is still a significant storm. But anyway, so we're all safe, and just for you guys to know, if you're ever looking at a map of the west coast of Florida, okay? And they show you the counties, right? So Tampa is Hillsborough County, all right? And then like Dunedin, Clearwater Beach, that area, that is um, Pinellas County, Pinellas Park, obviously. At the very bottom of the next county, which is Pasco County, the very bottom in the if you're looking at the map, it's the left-hand corner at the bottom, right where Pasco starts and Pinellas County ends. That's where I am, right on the Gulf Coast. So, yes, um, we were not near any of the danger zones, although initially they did there was some concern because the way this storm was, and this was where I was at, this is why I was freaked out, because usually they consider, if you're on the east side of the wall, the eye wall, that's the dirty side and west is best, right? So we, where I am, would have been on like the northwest side of the eye wall, which normally is the safer side, right? It's not as bad. But this storm, for whatever reason, all of the rain was on the northwest side. And this is what I was worried about. But also, when you're on the opposite side of the eye wall, what happens is the hurricane pulls the water from the other side towards it. Does that make sense? And that's when you get, for where it makes landfall, that's where you get the storm surge and all that stuff. Well, the water goes away, but then the water has to come back. And there, I watched a few TikToks, and there were people like in like Pinellas County, kind of like by like Clearwater, that area. Anyway, but the water had been pulled from the Gulf, right? And there was like a mile and a half from where the sea wall is, that it's an actual wall, where, you can see where the water line is, but you could go from like their docks and the seawall, and you could go a mile and a half out, and you could see the bottom of the ocean, which is it's a cool thing to see, but it's also unsettling because that water has to come back, and it came back today. And there was some flooding for people. We were lucky. The way that my neighborhood is, my house happens to be up on a little in the neighborhood, kind of up on a little bit of a hill. Okay, so the front yard would have been fine, but the backyard probably, because they were telling us, like if you get a flooding, just in a normal like afternoon thunderstorm, then you want a sandbag or whatever. So we did all that because we wanted to be prepared. And for me, it just took me a while to get um where I felt like, "Hey, Sam. Hey, Shamina," where I felt like coming back online. Because "Hey, Rena," the waiting for the storm, because like, I was everybody knows this. I was obsessed with watching WFLA. First of all, I just like JB. He does make me laugh. And then the meteorologist that he had on there was a pinball wizard. So, like every other question related to weather, and then there was like a pinball um, story around it. So I was interested, and so I shouldn't have watched as much as I did because I got a little sneeze. Phew, sorry. Phew. Sorry, you guys. Hey, Amelia. Good to see you, babe. So I got a little obsessed watching it, and I really I tried to like turn it off and watch other things, and then I would be into watching whatever else I was watching, and then I would just turn it right back on. And I think that I overdid it a little bit, and so just the waiting and the worrying, because really I kinda knew that it would be, if anything, we were just gonna, "Hey, Zoe," we were just gonna get the rain. That was unsettling because it's been so wet here, and I was worried about the trees, but the thing that I was really dreading is the not having electricity. I went through Irma, we didn't have electricity for 4 days, which, to be fair, sounds like a gripey, like nothing. 4 days without electricity is nothing compared to how long other people who were also impacted by Irma were without, electricity. The only reason we got ours on so soon is because we were on the same power grid as, downtown Dunedin, and so they wanted to get the restaurants and stuff back at businesses and stuff back up and going. So I was lucky, but I do remember that, and the thing is, what I was worried about is how it gets hot after a hurricane, although this time I will say Ian brought some cooler weather, so, like, Thursday, Friday, was really blustery, but it was, like, cooler, so it was actually, like, 70 degrees, I think, Friday. I had the windows and everything open. Yeah, it's bad not having electricity when you don't realize how much you rely on electricity till your ass ain't got no electricity, you know what I'm saying? And it isn't even like your own fault. Like, you can't just be like, "Oh crap, I forgot the bill," and then pay it and then get it back on. No, no, no. You gotta wait. And then I got stuck after the hurricane had moved through, then I started watching all of the footage from, like, TikTok and then WFLA, and then they did the flyovers, and it was just a lot, and so it just kinda wore me out, and I feel like a jerk even saying that. It wore me out because, I know what the people, um farther south than I am are going through. Like, their homes are devastated, their cities are devastated, their lives, I've seen it. It's destroyed and it's devastated, and I feel like an asshole just saying that, "Oh, worrying about it exhausted me." Like, what a dick. But that's really what I just tell you guys all the things, and that's really just what it was. I had a ton of anxiety, and after you have all that anxiety, you just get wore out, and that's what happened, and I just stayed away. So, I'm sorry that I put off going live, especially streaming the trial. Now, Thursday, there was no court because one of the jurors was sick in the, Wagner trial. So, but Friday, there was, a lot of, there was a lot of witnesses, and so what I think we're gonna do is Sunday, um, night, I'm gonna come live, and we're gonna do a recap, because one of the people that testified was, Hannah Mae Rodin's boyfriend at the time. He testified Friday. So, I definitely want us to be caught up, because last week would have been the 3rd week of the trial, so this is going to be the 4th week of the trial, and I would imagine that old Jake and Angela Wagner are going to testify sooner rather than later. But I also think they're probably going to opt out because they're petty like that, and their privileges have been revoked until after they testify. So who knows what they'll do? But I would rather be ready in case they do decide to testify and be recorded. At least one of them, both of them, I don't even care, either or both. So I want to be ready for that. Plus, the internet has been a little bit wonky because it's down, and it's, being, how it is. This was a lot. Ian was not messing around. And one thing I find interesting about it is during all of the WFLA coverage, um, the meteorologist was asked if Ian, after he was done with Florida, because we all saw that he was going to head back into the Atlantic, right? And would he reform? And this um, meteorologist said he didn't think so. Well, obviously that wasn't the case. And now, um, we have friends here on the YouTubes that were impacted by Ian reforming into a hurricane and causing more destruction and devastation. And so this was not, Ian wasn't, I mean, look, I'm not even going to lie. There were about 11 billion TikToks in, like, starting Monday, making fun of Ian, like Ian from Florida, you know how it can be. We have to joke about this stuff, So they were joking about, I don't know anybody named Ian that's tough and stuff like that. And then look what he did. So yeah, it was bad nonstop, Mom. It really was. And I agree with you, Cement Shoes and Amelia. I think it's ridiculous that they are allowed to opt out. I understand that it's important to uphold laws and rights of human beings. Okay, I get it, but they've already taken their plea deals. They are convicted of the crimes for which they took the plea deal. And at this point, yes, they do have rights. They're still human beings, but they didn't. I think that given what they themselves have admitted to doing, that they should have to get up in front of the Roden family, who is physically there in the courtroom, and any Roden family. Hey, Corky, how are you? I think that they should have to get up and testify and tell the members of the Roden family attending the trial, and also the ones that are watching the trial stream, exactly what they did. And that is not, it should, to me, they should not have that privilege, in my opinion. They just shouldn't. Yes, yes, nonstop, Mom. That is true. It's an awful tragedy. It's awful what happened. Mother Nature is, hey, Max, Mother Nature is not to be trifled with, y'all. She ain't playing. So, hey, Anita. Like, I'm all for, you guys know how I feel about, the law and stuff like that. And I am, due process and trials being fair and the law being followed and the Constitution being followed, all of those things. I support all of those things. But these two people specifically have already confessed to their roles, right? So at this point, they should have to tell, if they can say what they did, um, to police officers, etc., and the DA and whatnot, then they can get up there and tell the world what they did. Period. Period. I think they should be made to testify, and that's just how I feel. Only, even if it wasn't being streamed, they are made to testify, but I just don't think that they should get to opt out in a situation like this. I think it's ridiculous. I think it sets a very poor precedent. You don't do the crime if you can't do the time. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Now, on to the next thing. So I have watched all 10 episodes of Dahmer on Netflix, the series. I um, I will say this: if you haven't watched it, you should. That I recommend it because I think Evan Peters did an excellent job portraying Jeffrey Dahmer. And the thing is that it was for me, and this is the hardest part of somebody like Jeffrey to capture. But there's something about their eyes. They look, I don't know how to explain it other than to say they look like shark eyes. They look dead. And there's no joy, there's no light in them. There's just something about their eyes. And I don't know I don't know if there was something used, like contacts or something, but Evan Peters nailed it. And I also think that in this uh, portrayal of Dahmer and his crimes, this is the one series that I've seen that has shed even just a little light on the victims. Now, I will say, could there have been more light shed? Yes, absolutely. There always could be. And so, but in that respect, I think this series talked more about the victims and who they were than really Dahmer. And I will say this also, Evan Peters, one of the um, things he said about taking this role, like a caveat for him to take this role. We're going to go through some of that nonstop, Mom. Um, was that Dahmer not be portrayed in a um, empathetic or sympathetic light, and I actually don't think that he was. But to be fair, there okay. There are parts of Dahmer's life story that make you be like, "Ooh." It's in my opinion, in my est estimation, it's no different than the momentary, ooh, maybe sadness that you might feel for young Ted Bundy when he was a child, right? Before he became who he ended up being and doing the things he ended up doing, he didn't have a stable life either. And it's not an excuse. None of these are excuses or justifications. It's just for that one moment and I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling bad for a child, right? You're not feeling bad for the man that Jeffrey Dahmer became or the man that Ted Bundy became, but you're feeling bad for that child. And the truth of the matter is that just for that second, you feel bad for the child, not the adult. And for Dahmer, what has always fascinated me or made me curious about him is the nature versus nurture element that goes into how people ultimately end up. And for me, I think for people like Bundy, um, I think that Bundy definitely um, was nature and a small bit of nurture, right? Like just a little bit. But for Dahmer, for me anyway, just everything that I've studied about him and read about him and stuff like that, I think that it's probably more like 90% nature, meaning he was born that way, and like 10% nurture. What I will say is, to me, it seems that it has to be it has to be a lot of nature, because there are people in this world who have been abandoned in the similar ways as Jeffrey Dahmer, and they didn't cope with it the way that he did. As far as the drinking part, yeah, people do cope with abandonment by drinking, right? It's not a healthy um coping mechanism, but it is, in the spectrum of normal, right? But they don't then seek out partners where the partner is incapacitated to the point where they have they have no control over themselves. The other person has total control over it, just so that they can't leave. That is not a healthy that's not a healthy way to work through your abandonment issues. And so yeah, and this is the other thing that I wanted to talk about. So I want to talk more. I do want to talk a lot about this case, but the way that I would rather do it is, like, tonight we'll talk about the crimes, right? Tonight we're going to talk about Dahmer, right? But then the rest of the time, I would much rather focus on the victims, who they were, what kind, those things, because I would like for, um I think that's one thing that hasn't been done. I mean, ultimately, what I would really love is if the families of the victims got together at some point and maybe just um talked about their loved one, because I wish we could know them the way that their families do, know about them that way, you know what I mean? And I can't imagine what it would be like to have. Oh, thank you so much, Anita. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I can't imagine what it would feel like to have your family member taken from you to begin with, right? But then to find out the way that they were taken and everything else after the fact, and then to add insult to injury, they're swallowed up and forgotten and eclipsed by the level of depravity and the things that the perpetrator did. And so everybody is so shocked about what Dahmer did and how he carried it out and all this, that, and the other, that that the victims are really truly forgotten about. And I would so much rather talk about who they were as people. There's plenty of places that you can go if you want to hear the nitty-gritty details, and I mean, we'll talk about it, but of the crimes, right? But let's talk about the people that were affected by this, because it isn't just the immediate victims, it's their families, but it's also, and this is what that documentary, or not documentary, drama series really shed light on, was the fact that how it impacted long term the residents of that apartment building. Okay, because it did. I cannot um imagine that, knowing that, you were X amount of, I mean, think about an apartment building, you guys. We all know what apartment buildings look like. We've all been in an apartment a time or two, right? How thin those walls are, how close, what kind of close quarters you're in when you live in an apartment building like that, you know? So I can't imagine how they felt, but I would like to talk about that, because I think we do need to talk about that. It's part of the process, is not just, learning about the details of the crime and trying to figure out, um, you know, why the person did why Jeffrey was the way he was. And what exactly was he diagnosed with and all that stuff. That part is interesting too. And the reason that the FBI has a criminal behavior unit is so that law enforcement can learn to identify these people before they've worked their way up to 17 victims, right? Like, I mean, um, but what I'll say about some of the stuff that I thought was accurate, um, and also portrayed, but not newly portrayed. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of discussion has been had about this, the situation with the cops, and how was Jeffrey Dahmer able to get away with the crimes, given the fact that he had so many close calls, right? And there are people that say, well, he looked normal. Okay, here's the deal. Um, okay, first of all, normal is a very relative term, right? Obviously, and yes, looks wise, it's not like he came with a warning sign, right? Um, but that's, in my opinion, it's not that that's not what it was about. It was a combination of many, many things, all working together. So when Jeff had his first victim in the car with him and he was driving out to dispose of his body, he was stopped, right, by a cop. Part of the reason that he was let go is because Jeffrey Dahmer had this uncanny knack of remaining cool, calm, and collected when he had these close calls. He didn't panic. He didn't try to flee. He didn't do any of that. And the fact of the matter is that at 18, when that happened, had he not behaved that way, it would have probably stopped there. And he learned from that. So by the time it came to the 14-year-old Conorak that was returned to him, this is so Jeffrey, how Conorak got away is that Jeffrey had left the apartment to go and buy beer down at the liquor store, right? And so he got out, and the neighbors had called 911 and the cops had arrived, and rather than uh Jeffrey Dahmer flee the scene or hang back, right, and watch, he learned not to panic, and he walked right up to the cops and said, "Oh, no, no. He's 19, where he's my partner, he's my boyfriend, he's just, no, nothing's wrong. He's not on drugs. He's just drunk. He's just wasted." And the cops take him back upstairs, and they're in the house, and Tony Hughes's body was in the bed at this point, right? When this happens. And they look around. However, they didn't turn a light on. And you have to wonder, you have to wonder why that was. Well, there's a few reasons. First of all, it's okay, in 1991, when this happened, okay, when this specific incident happened, first of all, Jeff Dahmer was a white dude, okay? And so you have race played into it back then. It's not that racism doesn't play into things now, it's just that back in those days, people were not as quick to call it out, and it still exists today, but most people are working to change that. Most people are aware that it still exists. Most people are aware that it's a problem, and most people are working to try to change it. Back then, they were not, it's not that they weren't aware, it's just not as many people were working to change it. Okay. So, so there was that layer, right? That Jeff Dahmer was a white guy, a white male, right? And then his victims were predominantly African American, and then and Laotian. There was one white, two white guys, but anyway, minorities. The rest of his victims were minorities. Um, and so you have that layer. Simultaneously, you have, and this is still true to this day, and it's sad. When men, Sam, you didn't have to do that. Thank you, babe. Thank you so much. Simultaneously, and this is, like I said, this is true today. When men go missing, there isn't as much of an investigation, a fuss, as it is when women go missing. And that is just facts. Even to this day, it takes a lot for, unless it's some like really crazy circumstances, most of the time, men, when they go missing, hey, Nadine, good to see you, babe. Most of the time when they go missing, they don't get as much attention, and that's facts. So then you have that they were male. Then they were also minorities. But then there is the third layer, which is the fact that they were gay. And although homophobia continues to exist, and it's sad that it does because it's ridiculous, I think as a society, have grown somewhat. Is it perfect? No. Is it where it needs to be? Absolutely not. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely, there is room for improvement. A ton of improvement. So you had those three layers working simultaneously to make this what it was. Because let's be real honest about this here. Jeffrey Dahmer wasn't incredibly, first of all, it's not like he was a smooth talker. He wasn't. He was completely socially awkward, but he was able to remain calm. And you have to remember also that when the cops were dealing with him, right, it's they this was their first encounter with Jeff Dahmer. So it's not like they knew him from around the way or anything like that. You know, they're meeting him for one, although I will say, in the case of Conrad, I don't understand how they believe that he was 19. I really don't. Other than I think that they wanted to be quite honest with you. I just don't think they wanted to deal with it. But anyway, so because it's not like Jeffrey. Welcome to memberships, Nadine. Welcome to the whole club. Yes, that's the other thing. It did stink, and that's facts. And they didn't want to go in, and they didn't want to deal with it. So that's Jeffrey Dahmer. It's not like he was in, like, quite frankly, he was sloppy by most standards of serial killers, like Bundy. His disposal of the victims was he would spread it out, and they were far away from where he lived. You know what I'm saying? Like, he took great pains to separate himself from the victims' bodies. Although with Jeffrey Dahmer, part of what his compulsion was the need, and it was a compulsion, the need to continue to possess the victim long after everything, long after they had died, right? So that was part of it, but even beyond that, he was, as far as like housekeeping wise, he wasn't that, I mean, I mean, I'm not talking about the bodies. I'm talking about, like, just keeping the tools and everything that he used clean and neat. He really didn't do that. Although he did have, and this is a part that the the series kind of left out, but he went to great pains to monitor his apartment and had video cameras set up inside. And the other part that the series did not really um, highlight accurately, the way that they showed Dahmer picking up his victims was at the bathhouses and then at the bars, but also Jeffrey Dahmer utilized the mall too. And so, yeah, I agree. Exactly, nonstop mom. If he had not, if he had had a separate place, then he would have gone undetected for far longer. Just be Mainly because of his victim type. And this is the other thing, and this is true of other serial killers, right? So, um, other serial killers who use I cannot think of the guy in Dallas, what his name was right off the top of my head, but his victims were prostitutes, and um he took their eyes, and I cannot think of what his name, it'll come to me, just give me a minute. And so it's the demographic of his victims that was also helpful. Like when that guy that I was talking about from Dallas, um, there was a beat cop that was on to it being a serial killer. And the reason why is because she worked a lot with the prostitutes. And so she sort of, they would talk to her, and she started noticing that there were prostitutes missing. But the problem is in our society that prostitutes, they typically tend to be, it's difficult to know if they're missing or if they've just gotten off the streets, or if they've just left. So it makes it difficult to track, right? Now the girls know, and she had a like a repertoire, is that what I'm trying to say? No, a I guess a relationship. I can't think of the word right now. Um, with the girls, and so um, they would talk to her, and they were telling her about this one specific John that they had that you know they were scared of, and the girls talked about. Rapport is the word I was looking for. Rapport. So, but uh, where Dahmer was, and this is another thing. So, do I believe, because Dahmer was asked if um, part of why he did what he did had anything to do with race, and he was actually emphatic that no, it didn't. That it was about the person at that moment, in that moment in time, that he found to be the most physically beautiful, I think is the word that he used, or the words that he used. And that he became, when he was pressed, he became angry, and about the accusation. He resented the accusation, that it had nothing to do with him being a racist. um, I will say this. Do I think that Jeffrey Dahmer was a racist? No, I do not think that these were racially motivated. I think there's a kernel of truth, probably a huge kernel of truth, to him finding these men physically beautiful and good looking, right? But I also think that he knew that the world we live in, and I think that he knew that he learned very quickly from after the first victim from the neighborhood or from the bar that he brought home, that these are not people that, um, yeah, their loved ones miss them, right? But it's very difficult to get law enforcement interested in looking. So I do not think that he did it because he was a racist and did not like minorities. What I think it was is, I do think that there is a part of him that did find in that moment for them that they were very physically attractive. But I also think that he learned that, again, this is not the law enforcement wasn't um, out looking for these guys the way that they might if it were somebody else. Correct. I agree, Max, and I agree, Nonstop Mom. I think that, the thing about predators is people like Jeffrey Dahmer, and not even serial killers, that just predators, people who are predators in general. They have something innate in them that they are able to see things in other human beings that people who are not predators can't see. And they know. It's sort of like how a lioness can see an injured caribou or sense an injured caribou. You know what I mean? Like, they see a weakness and they can see it in them in a way that people who are not predators don't see because they're not trying to prey. You know what I mean? And I think that's a lot of what it was. Ah, crap. See, this is probably why my mouse is broken, because I'd be dropping this thing all the time. Um, but yeah, I think that is part of it. But I do find it interesting that he got angry when when they pressed him about it being him, basically being racist. Um, and then, there's that 8-year gap from when he was in the military. So there have been two men who served with him in Germany at the time. Come on, Nestor, if you're coming. And they have made outcries. And I so to say that he wasn't victimizing anybody or that he took a break, he didn't actually. I suppose from unaliving people, it would appear that he took a break. I find it very difficult to believe that he did take a break. What I think is more likely is that he probably didn't. He just didn't get caught, and that's just the truth. He wasn't suspected, and he makes some comments. It's in the. Is it A&E? No, Oxygen. Dahmer on Dahmer. And I'm want to also, while I'm thinking about it, so October 7th, which is next, what, Thursday or Friday? Conversations with a Killer, the Jeffrey Dahmer tapes, is going to be released on Netflix. That's Joe Berlinger's series. So we're going to hear more in depth the things that he says, obviously pertaining to. But the thing that really like kind of annoys me is that this whole, well, Jeffrey Dahmer said that, why would I lie now? Well, because first of all, or why would I not tell? To me, I think he told on the people I think he confessed to the crimes that he had to confess. And that he wanted to confess to, because of his compulsion to keep a piece of of his victims with him for all time, and knowing that he had been caught, knowing that whether he talked or not, it was going to be it was very likely that he was at the minimum going to be in a mental institution for the rest of his natural life, right? Or that he would be in prison for the rest of his natural life. There was no, I think that he told, because I think he was reliving it, but I think that he knew that he wasn't going to get a chance to do anything like this again. And so I do think that there are probably victims that are in Germany, and there's probably maybe one or two here in the United States that he hasn't talked about. And that was his way at the time of continuing to possess those people, those victims, for all time, because that's the way he thinks. You know, this when I remember watching Dahmer on Dahmer, and I was paying attention to what, it's not so much what he was saying, although that was important, obviously, but more the way that he was saying it. And it's not just the words that human beings choose to use, it's the order that they put those words in that I find to be very telling and very fascinating. And when he was expressing that he knew what he had done was wrong, the element that he leaves out is that he doesn't care. That's the thing about what do I believe that Dahmer was honest when he said things like, I dehumanized them, but then he will follow that up with, I only cared about my own selfish needs and wants. Um, I mean, is that untrue what he's saying? No, but when people say things like that, when they take accountability, it's a type of taking accountability, but there is no sincerity behind it. He knows that that is what is expected of him. That is what people want to hear. So that is what he said. Do I think he meant that he recognized that he was selfish? No. I don't think he cared for one hot second about anybody other than himself, period. And where that came from, I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, I do think that part of it, I think a lot of it for him is nature. I think he was born the way he was born. I think it's complete poppycock, and I can't even understand why his dad would, being a scientist, why his father would even think along the lines that he thought about him having surgery for a hernia when he was 4 years old. And it's not the surgery that he thinks caused or could be a cause of why Jeffrey Dahmer ended up being the way he was. He thinks it was the anesthesia. That perhaps that during the time that he was under anesthesia, that it caused brain damage, or the fact, or the medications that his mother was on while she was pregnant with him. Um, we'll never know because his brain wasn't studied. So we'll never know what level of, like, frontal lobe damage that he may or may not have had, which is your impulse control, and the part of the brain that sort of gives us empathy and makes us, humans, where, you know, I yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that the way that he said it in a way that would lead a person who wasn't really, like, use thinking about, just taking what he said at face value without thinking about what he actually said. Um, he says it in that way, like he knows that it's expected of him to take accountability for being a selfish person and all of that, right? And like he's doing everybody a favor by confessing and just getting it over with, right? But it rings so hollow. He doesn't care that he was selfish at all, at all. And I think that I don't think that, as far as Lionel Dahmer goes um, with the roadkill, right? Do I think that that caused Jeffrey Dahmer to be the way that he was? No. And this is why. Because I think for him, already hardwired into his brain. It's part of just who he is. You know how you can dislike a certain food that you've never actually had? Like for me, it's eggs. I've never eaten eggs. I have no idea what an egg tastes like. I have no clue about it. But I know that I don't like it. And the reason I know I don't like it is because I've smelled them cooking and been disgusted. So I just don't like eggs. But I can't say, well, one time I was cooked eggs and I got really sick. And from then on, I've been like, fuck those eggs. You know, no, for me, it's just, I've never liked them and I never will like them. There's nothing anybody could do to make me like an egg. It just won't ever happen. I think for Dahmer, the because there are people and even kids. My mom was a histologist my entire life, and I was around pathologists growing up my entire life, and I was fascinated by the human body. But what I was the most fascinated about with respect to the human body is how a person can die and an autopsy be performed and they don't know anything about, and they can find all the stuff just from doing an autopsy. To me, that was fascinating. And so, if I were wired incorrectly, I need a tape to fix my brain. If you know, you know. Then perhaps that might have kicked something off in me. But for Dahmer, he actually had something called, and I can't think of the name of it. It's a psychiatric term. It has to do with being aroused by the slickness of the way that organs look. And so for him, it clicked. And I don't think that Lionel made him the way that he was by allowing. Will you let Nestor in a minute? Because he didn't want to come in when I. Sorry, you guys. But I don't think that I don't think it's what caused it. I think that let's say Lionel didn't do that. Let's say Lionel never had him dissect any roadkill. Jeffrey Dahmer would have still turned out to be who Jeffrey Dahmer was. I think what Lionel was trying to do was on it's it's not like Lionel was into sports, right? If he had been into sports, perhaps he would have thrown a ball with Jeff or gotten him into some type of sports. But he was a scientist. That's what interested him, and Jeff seemed to be interested, and that's what he thought it was. Now, I will say that I also believe that the red flags that Lionel saw in his son, and the thing is, parents know. It's not like these parents were addicts or alcoholics and they weren't present. They were there. I think any of the red flags that Lionel saw, I think, and the times that I do think that Dahmer tried to talk to his dad in a way, I think that Lionel sort of thought that any of the issues he was having were related to his sexuality, and I don't think that Lionel wanted to talk about it. Good night. Good night, Quirky. Quirky S. Thanks for coming in, babe. I don't think he wanted to talk about it. I think he wanted to avoid, and I don't think that he wanted to acknowledge the fact that his son was gay, and I just think that's what it was. I think that played a huge role in the amount of blind eye turning that his father did. And I think that for his mother's part, I think, to be fair to her, I think that she had tremendous postpartum depression. And back in those days, when in the 60s, when Jeffrey was young and his brother was born, we didn't know what that was. I mean, I can tell you that, for me, even, so I had my first child in 1995. Okay. And they did not really talk to me at all about the potential for postpartum depression. There was a little thing in like your aftercare stuff that they send you home with that talks about the baby blues, right? And but nothing beyond that. Not it should last up until, if it doesn't pass by such and such, you know, you need to talk to your doctor. None of that. And that was in 1995, for Pete's sake. Let me see. I feel like, hold on. I don't think that I really knew anything about postpartum depression, and then um the all the way to the other extreme, which is postpartum psychosis. But I don't think that I learned about that until Andrea Yates, and I'm reasonably sure that that happened after I had, yeah, that was in 2001. 2001. So, I mean, I don't think we really, as a, I don't think it was something that was talked about, to be quite honest with you. I think there's a lot of things that we just don't talk about. And I think that's also part of the reason why um, we don't have, um, it's not that we don't have serial killers, but remember how in the 70s and the 80s and then into the early 90s, there was such, like, you know, there was Ted Bundy, there was John Wayne Gacy, there was Ed Gein, there, it's not that we were, things like back in the day, things were safer. I just think that we were more naive in those days. Things didn't get talked about the way that they get talked about now. In fact, things didn't get reported in the news, which is the way that most of us hear about stuff, is through the news, right? It didn't get reported on mainstream media, and that's all there was back when I was, but back in those days, even too. That's people's source of information, was mainstream media, newspaper, radio. That's how you learned about what was going on in the world. We weren't connected to the world by the internet yet. That was decades and decades and decades away. So I don't think it was a safer time back then. I just think that we have more knowledge now. Probably too much knowledge, because shit, sometimes we just do not use the smarts we have, or the information we have at our fingertips for good, unfortunately. So I think that's like a huge part of it. And I want to, there's some stuff on Court TV that I want to play for you guys, because I think that Lionel, I think he was honest when he said that it isn't that he didn't recognize what his son did as wrong, and that he, you know, like Jeff was the victim of circumstances, right? I think what it was for him is that um, I think he thought that Jeffrey Dahmer, I think he thought his son could be helped. And I think that he thought that if he were to put him, if he were to be in a mental institution, obviously it would still be prison, um, but it's a mental institution. I think that had that occurred, I think he thought that he could um, get insight into why Dahmer was the way he was, and then also on top of it, he could then have a relationship with his son. But as far as like, hold on a second. As far as like him getting out, I don't think that Lionel ever thought that Jeff Dahmer would walk the streets again. Like, I don't, that would be ridiculous. And the trial that he had was not, that's what the trial was about. It wasn't really about, it wasn't about the guilt or innocence, because that was established. Like, Jeff Dahmer was never going to plead not guilty, but it was about whether he was sane or insane, right? And I wanted to talk about that because I think that understanding the way that the courts handle being sane or insane, the legal definition is very, very different from the clinical definition. And we were talking, it seems like forever ago, weeks back, about Lori Vallow, right? And how, whether she was sane or insane. And I think personally, and I'm not qualified to treat or diagnose anybody. Let me just put that out there right away. So don't be hitting me up in the emails asking me to diagnose you, because I can't. I won't. I'm not qualified. But I think that watching and listening to the psychologist or psychiatrist that interviewed and evaluated Jeffrey Dahmer, and then ultimately came up with the diagnosis, and then, decided whether he was sane or insane at the time, is good in to help understand Lori Vallow, and why I personally believe, does Lori Vallow have some wrong ass way of thinking? I think we can all agree that Miss Lori Vallow Daybell has some very wrong thinking, right? But does she have a mental health issue? Probably, but not one, but not insofar as that she, that's the reason why she did what she did, right? So I think for Lori, we can all agree that A, she had wrong thinking, right? And B, that the things that she did were, and the way and her belief system was that she was a kookaloo, right? But you can exhibit crazy behaviors, right? And I don't think anybody would disagree that trying to turn a human being into a zombie so that you could control them is I hate using this word. How about we're not going to use normal. How about a healthy thought process, right? It's not a healthy thought process to have those ideas, right? And then it's, the thinking is one thing, the doing is the other. You got to have both, right? Or that eating a part of your victim so that you can have them with you, even, and you possess them in every way possible, right? That isn't, we can all agree that is certainly a disturbed thought process. And you can have disturbed thought process and even do some things that are crazy, right? But not actually be insane. And that's where I think we are with Lori, because I don't think that she is insane. I think she is highly, highly manipulative. And I think that what's going on right now with that case is incredibly interesting, because let's talk about that for just a second, because I'm just kind of wanting to have like a chill night tonight if we could. I'm not like, you know how I be getting, I have to like get eased back into the live thing. It's I'm extra. Hang on just a second, take a drink. Sorry about that. I was thirsty. So I probably should have muted my mic. I'm sure you heard me gulp. Sorry about that. Anyway, I kind of just wanted to have a night tonight where we just kind of just chitty chat. This situation occurring now with Chad Daybell's attorney, and calling Lori Miss Vallow as opposed to Miss Daybell, or Miss Vallow as opposed to being called Mrs. Daybell, right? And is Chad turning on Lori? Well, I think turning on her is a reach. Hear me out. And this is why I say that, because it is my opinion that Lori and Chad are both highly, highly manipulative people. All right. And they are the type of manipulation that they require they require somebody who has the same type and level of evil manipulation in them in order to act on whatever it is that they're wanting to do. So they're the perfect storm to come together, right? And I do not think that he is turning on her. Hey, Sky Flashed. This is what I think he is doing. I think that it's a manipulation tactic. Do you not think that Lori and Chad discussed this eventuality as a possibility that they would be caught, that they would be, thank you, Sky Flash, that they would be caught and that they would be prosecuted? Come on. I'm sure they did, which is why, and you can somewhat hear it in the phone call when they're out there, when the feds are out there and the law enforcement are out at Chad Daybell's house and Lori calls. Because obviously both of them are very, very aware that their phone calls are being monitored, because when I don't know how many of you know this, probably all y'all, but the law is very nice about, prior to you, right when you answer the phone call, they be telling you, shit being recorded unless properly placed attorney calls, right? They all tell you that. We've all heard them, yada, yada, yada. You don't even have to hear them in person because they played these kind of calls 11 billion times. So we're all aware of this, right? So they were aware. And you can tell in the conversation that they are talking, but they're not saying anything, if that makes sense, because they've talked about this before. And I guarantee you that this is not Chad turning on Lori. This is something that they know that they have to do. It would be much easier for the state to try them together, and it would be getting a conviction, trying them together is easier than trying them separately. And that is the truth. Because if they're tried separately, right, you're going to have, this is what Lori is going to say. Chad snookered me. He got me with a near-death experience and the dry sense of humor. Jesus wearing the different colored robes. The non-judgmental Jesus. He got me with the Jesus talks, right? And that's what she's going to say. And then you have Chad, and he's going to say, look at her. She's already unalived her husband. What makes you think she's not capable of unaliving her children on her own? She didn't need me to do it. She didn't need me to do her dirty work. She had Alex, and he was still alive at that time. How can you blame me? This is part of it. This is manipulating. Now, see, now they've escalated, right? First, they were content manipulating the immediate people around them, and they did. And now they've kicked it up a notch, and they're manipulating the legal system, which is why Chad wants his, this is not the first time he's filed for a separation of trial. This will be the second time. Well, Nonstop Mom, that is an excellent point, and it's a good point, but isn't it possible that he could try to say, listen, we've heard all kinds of crazy defenses. I'm not saying it'll work. I'm just saying what it would be, right? Listen, Lori was my friend. He was still married to, and she was still alive to his wife at the time, right? And he was still communicating with her, and he could very easily say, well, Lori was a friend of mine. I trusted her implicitly, and I gave her and anybody that was a friend of Lori, including her brother, was a friend of mine, and they had access to my home, and I never thought twice about it, in my yard. You know what I'm saying? Does it make sense? Is that logical? No. Is that what happened? Also no, but it is a defense. And remember that when you are the defendant, you only have to convince one juror, one, where the state has to convince all 12. And now that I think about it, I am kind of curious about this, because it's one jury, not two, which is interesting, because there have been cases like the Menendez brothers where they were tried at the same time, but they had two separate juries, right? And so now I am kind of curious about this. Let me think about this a little bit more before I come to reach my final conclusion about whether it would be easier for the state to try them together or try them separately. Kind of, I suppose it would depend on how convincing their defense was. See, because when Jason and Damien were tried together, their defense teams weren't like 11 billion, like 100% working together, but they were also not at complete adversaries, right? Like Jason didn't, his team didn't put on witnesses that testified to Damien's guilt. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is kind of interesting, because let's play this out. If it's clear at this point that Chad's attorney has taken a more adversarial stance respective to her attorneys, right? They're not working together. Nonstop Mom, I'm not saying that it's a defense that's going to work. I'm just saying that, I mean, look, why are Chad and Lori even bothering to go through with this trial? Right? Why are they even bothering to plead not guilty, given the evidence that's against them? You see what I'm saying? It's part of the defense. Doesn't have to, they only got to convince one person that this could have happened. They only got to introduce one reasonable doubt to one juror. So there you go. I think that must be how California does it with two different juries, because that's where the Menendez brothers took place too, was in California. But anyway, I'm just thinking how this is going to work for them to be tried at the same time, because you don't want to put evidence on, like Chad doesn't want to put, if they're tried together, Chad's not doesn't want to put a witness on that is going to testify that Lori is guilty, because then she'll just put a witness on that testifies that he's, you see what I'm saying? I'm very, very curious how this is going to play out. Guess we'll have to wait and see. But now Chad's lawyer has said, oh, and hey, by the way, not only y'all do we want our trials severed, right? I don't want to be tried with hot Cheeto lipstick wearer, right? I mean, that's a good point too. But there have been many, many cases where people have spent less time physically together in any type of capacity, whether that be a romantic relationship or, friends that then became romantic, that have spent less time physically in each other's presence than, and they have a stronger bond. And a year is nothing. And they won't talk. They're still loyal. And I think that, cause see, this is an interesting conundrum, right? So the whole premise for why they did what they did and why they were so close is because haven't they shared multiple lifetimes together? Weren't they married over multiple lifetimes? Right. So what's a year in jail? They're just going to get back to, you know what I'm saying? They're bound. Their souls are bound for eternity. So just because they're separated in this lifetime by prison walls, right? Doesn't, why would that, then that blows their whole, we've been together and found each other repeatedly over lifetimes. If you you know what I'm saying? Then they won't still be together over multiple lifetimes if they get turned on. Then it makes their whole premise of why they did, part of the reason why they did what they did, that how much could you really have believed it if you're ready to turn on each other? Does that make sense? I'm probably not putting that the best way, but like their souls are bound together. And that is because I was in Andog TV's chat. I can't remember what night that was that he was talking about Stranger Things and then something else, and I made some, you know me, you can't take me no kind of place. So I made some joke, a reference to, Feel the Fire, but it was that podcast episode with Chat about something about his talks with Jesus, right? Kicking it with Jesus, something. I said something, and Dog didn't know what I was talking about. I can't remember. I'll have to look it up. Give me a second. Nonstop Mom. And so then I started telling him about this case. I feel awful because, y'all, I broke Dog TV. He didn't know about this case. So then he gets on the internets and starts Googling it. Bless his heart, he's blown away. Then me and the chatter telling him about the, thank you, Sky Flashed, about the closet portal, and he's asking, is the closet portal, is that at Chad Daybell's house or was it somewhere else? And then here comes me with, well, of course it was at his house. If you use the portal to measure people's light and dark energy, you need to have it handy. You don't want to have to. What if you have somebody that you need to check out at 1 o'clock in the morning? You can't just be going over to the closet portal at somebody else's house and knocking on the door. No, no, no. You need to have it at your house. It needs to be in a convenient location, so bless poor Ann Dog's heart. I mean, you could just, it's interesting to watch somebody in real time, who's not heard about this case, then start to hear about the case and start to uncover all of the things, right? It's interesting to watch that, and the look on their face when they start, yeah, it's fascinating. Poor Ann Dog, bless his heart. But he likes true crime. I'm shocked that I was kind of shocked when he hadn't heard about this case prior. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious how this is all going to play out. But anyway, Chad's lawyer says, "Okay, listen here, y'all. Well, we want the trial separated, and guess what else? We don't care if there's cameras in the courtroom. Air it all, mention it all, show it all." Which I think is another tactic, because people, hi, I'm people, are livid and angry with the judge's decision. We can have audio, but not to have any video from the trial, right? We all want to see it. And it's not, it's not for me. I mean, I'm sure other people have their reasons why they want to see it. But for me, I have many reasons why I want to see it. I'm not so much interested in, I don't really want to hear, although it's part of it, so I will. I don't really want to know all the details of what happened to Tylee and JJ, in their last hours on Earth. Like, I don't really want to hear about that. It breaks my heart. It just goes against everything that I stand for as a human being, especially with respect to, being a parent. I take my job very responsible, very seriously. And there's just I don't understand people that hurt their own children. I cannot ever wrap my brain around it. And I'm glad I can't, because if I ever could start to identify, I would be scared for myself. Honestly, I would. But I kind of don't really want to hear that part, but I do want to hear the plotting and the planning that Lori and Chad did. And I also think that Lori enjoys being able to get one over on people. She enjoys people buying her act and believing the mask that she wears. She enjoys knowing that she fools people into thinking that she is a certain type of person when she is 100% not that person. That's part of her personality. I suppose it's a disorder. I'm not exactly sure, but whatever. That's part of who she is. And for it to be exposed, who she actually is as a person, that to her is like, to her would be, is one of the last things that she wants. She does not want people to know who she really is. And so I think that having the trial be public is punishment for her, part of the punishment. You know what I'm saying? Sorry, my sister-in-law is texting me. I gotta go. I'm going to a baby shower tomorrow, so she need my address. But anyway, yeah. Exactly. I need to hear everybody's parts. And look, I'm human, okay? And I can be open with you guys. You know that there is a part of Jen Lu that is petty, especially when it comes to criminals, especially when it comes to people who unalive children, and then especially when the children that they unalive are their own. And I know that it is going to piss Lori off to the 11th billionth degree to have Melanie Gibb sitting in that witness stand testifying against her. I know that she's going to be seething on the inside. And there is a part of me that will take satisfaction in knowing that she is sitting there at the defendant's table seething. Listen, I'm no Melanie Gibb fan either. I don't know that I believe that Melanie did what she did because she's a good person. I quite frankly believe that Melanie did what she did to save her own ass. And that's just how I feel about it, frankly. But I want to hear all the things. And that's just the way that it is. But I know that it's going to like burn. I know that Lori's blood is going to boil right when they call old Melanie the Bangs Gibb onto the stand to have her testify. I know they are. I know it is. And I want to see it. I'm going to have a petty moment. It is what it is. That's how I feel about it. So yeah. So anyway, I thought what we would do, maybe I gotta finish this West Memphis 3 thing because I have the knots and I want to show you guys those dadgum knots because Vincent's missing ear just did a phenomenal job tying them, and not just tying them, but he took wonderful, good, clear pictures. But then he he explained what the various knots mean and what they do and yada, yada, yada. And it's not really yada, yada, yada. I just don't want to tell you all the things. I'd rather show you all the things. And so, I want to go over that with you guys, because I want you guys to see that. But I also want to do this, Jeffrey Dahmer thing, because I think it'll be interesting. So I don't know. I'll figure out some type of a schedule, and that way we can go through all of it. But that's really what I want to do, because I really want to. I want to look into, because I want to know more about his victims. I want to know who they were, and I thought that yes, the knots. Yeah, they are interesting. I'm telling you right now, I suppose I could learn to tie them, but it's not, I'd have to definitely practice. They're not these are not knots that you get by accident. You know what I'm saying? These are purposely done. And I'm very curious about that. And I'm curious also, I want to try to find any type of like studies that are done, because it's interesting to me that with respect to Michael Moore and Steve Branch, they have one type of knot on the right side of their body, and then they have another type of knot on their left side. And what's interesting to me, I suppose, is why is that? That's why it doesn't feel like, because if you look at Chris Byers, right? Not obviously, but I'll say this: Christopher Byers, both sides of his body have the same kind of knot, right? So that would be indicative of the same person tying the knots, right? But then you have Michael having one type of knot on his left side and one type of knot on his right side, which would be indicative of two different people tying the knots, right? But why would one person tie the knots on Chris Byers, and then two people? Why would it take two people to tie them? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm curious I know that there have been studies done, but I want to look into that and bring that to you guys. So yeah, And then but tomorrow night, for sure, we're going to be doing a catch up and on what's transpired thus far in the Pike County murder trial, so that we can be caught up for Monday, because they're back to putting, I don't know, I think they might be done with some of the forensics part of it, and now are getting into, I feel like the state is probably going to have Jake and Angela on the stand towards the end of their, I think they want to close with them, because I don't know. I don't know. I feel like that's for sure Jake. Jake should be one of the last witnesses, right? Because that's, before the defense, because he'll be the most, as far as, because Angela wasn't there, right? Oh, one of the things that they did show while I was off this week is the surveillance. And so what you can see is you can't really make out the vehicles, but yeah, you heard me right. Vehicles. There were two vehicles, and you can see the two different vehicles, like at 1:30 in the morning, going back and forth between the various crime scenes. And I was watching Anjanette Levy. She did another like recap, and that's how I found out about this, and now I have to go back and watch. But I didn't realize that there were, first of all, I thought that they only used one vehicle, which now makes it even more interesting how George is going to be like, man, I wasn't there. And then, but she was saying that when the jurors did their walk to the crime scene, when they toured the crime scenes, that they kept going, that the way that they took them was back and forth, because they wanted them to see the route and what the killers actually did. And that they were back and forth between crime scenes multiple times. So it isn't like which is interesting, because I didn't realize that. I thought they were methodical in that they went to the first crime scene, did what they had to do at the first crime scene, including picking up shells, etc., before moving on to the second, and then the third, and then the fourth crime scene. But that's not, evidently, I don't think that that's the case. So now your girl is going to we're going to have to play that. And now we're going to, yeah. So now that's where we're at. And, so now I've got to look into that, and I want us to be all good and caught up, for tomorrow. So that, not for tomorrow. I want us to be good and caught up tomorrow. Yes, they showed surveillance apparently nonstop, Mom. That's what Anjanette Levy says. So I got to find it now. And they showed it. So, yeah. I mean, they did. I know that they, part of the reason that not part. One of their charges is burglary. And that's why, because they removed surveillance equipment, etc. But I'm not 150-11% sure that they destroyed the footage. You know what I mean? I feel like they must have retrieved, because they talked about DVRs that the security footage would have been recorded on. And I'm I'm thinking they must not have, if they retrieve DVRs, they must have not been completely destroyed, and I guess evidently they were not completely erased. And I don't want to talk out of school, but I highly doubt that Anjanette Levy would report that if she didn't, you know what I'm saying, if it wasn't shown in court. And she did say it was sort of tedious, so thanks for the heads up. Oh, nonstop mom, you was in the dramas. Well, you know I won't judge. I never judge because I be getting involved in the drams too. Come on. Sometimes it's hard not to. Sometimes you're just like, wait, what is happening? And then before you know it, 2 hours have gone by and your mouth is still open because you're shocked. I don't blame you. It's hard sometimes. Stuff sucks you in. So yeah, we're going to do that tomorrow night. So I may have to go live a little earlier than normal, just to fit it all in, and be ready. We're probably going to have to like watch and listen to stuff sped up. Otherwise we are not going to get through it. And yeah, so I think I'm going to end it for now. I got to get up kind of early tomorrow. I got to go to that baby shower and stuff, and I'm excited. So I want to um I'm going to get off of here, but I want to thank you guys so much for coming in tonight and checking on me this week. I really, really appreciate it. I had a little, Sally Field moment when you guys were, checking on me. You will like me. You really like me. I had that moment. I appreciate it. Florida's got some work to do for sure. But thank you guys so very much for being here tonight. And again, for checking on me and stuff. It meant the world to me. I really do. I do appreciate it. And I will see all of you lovelies tomorrow night. And I'm going to thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Nansa. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did too. And my heart goes out to the families, to my fellow Floridians. If I lived closer, I would, be down there helping. But anyway, good night, you guys. Thank you so much for being here. And I will see you all hopefully tomorrow night. I mean, I will be here tomorrow night. I don't know where y'all will be. Hopefully it'll be here tomorrow night. And if you haven't done so, could you guys give your girl a thumbs up on the stream? I'd greatly appreciate it. And I will talk to y'all tomorrow night. Y'all have a good rest of your Saturday night. And stay safe in the real streets and on these YouTube streets, because they's dicey. Good night, y'all. Take care, and I'll see you tomorrow. All right. Bye.